Hey team, welcome back to The Pillars, the podcast of the 363rd ISR Wing. We're in the studio today with Tech Sergeant Joe.
Yep.
How's it going? And we're here with Dr. Jerry.
Yep.
And this is Dr. Reed. And start off today with talking about a little bit of news. So we had some good news in our team this week. And
Yes.
I'd like to share that. You took a
I took-
historical last WAPS test.
Yes, because I always get the best test dates that they ever give out, which was
Nice.
like the first, I think I got the second day of test cycle. And so, yes, this will be the last WAPS testing I should ever take for my career.
The irony was not lost on our team yesterday as we were reading the
Yes.
announcement that WAPS testing is ending for senior NCOs, and there you were
Yes.
slaving away, taking your test as
I
the announcement
literally,
came out.
I literally walked out and my phone was like, ka-ding,
No kidding.
right? Because I didn't have my phone on me.
Yeah.
And then I looked at it and I was like, you've got to be kidding. He's like,
Congratulations, you took the last WAPS
I
test.
did take the last WAPS test. So, but that's exciting. I think that that's a great move for the Air Force. I really believe that there's value in the testing, but I think that Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Chief Wright, is definitely on the right track with making sure that the promotion selection is a little better.
Exciting changes, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots going on. Lots of details from his visit around the Air Force. And but the good news doesn't stop there, fortunately. Dr. Jerry got some outstanding news yesterday, the product of a couple of years of pretty intense and hard work.
Yeah. Since even before I joined the 363rd ISR Wing, I can now say I am a board-certified counseling psychologist.
Congratulations.
So thank you. Get to add a few more letters to my name, and hopefully that comes across in the products that we do here. But thank you for that recognition.
No problem. It is always exciting to kind of share the successes of your team members, and I hope you guys get that opportunity to celebrate with people the good news that are happening in their life. It does great things for teams, and it promotes loyalty and kind of all the best values that we espouse as airmen. So really excited for some of those things. But that is neither here nor there as we are getting into the topic for the week. Jerry, you've been doing some reading recently. As it often occurs, you bring in some of the ideas from your reading. And so you wanted to talk to us about stuff related to parenting today.
Yes. So as a board-certified
Oh my God,
counseling
here it comes.
psychologist,
Here it
It
comes.
took like 3 seconds.
I felt it was incumbent upon myself to
You're
stay
never
up
going to live this
to
down.
date.
You are the most intelligent person in the room.
Oh,
Yes,
please.
Dr. Walker, we know.
Okay, I'll put that aside. But I was on the book face this morning, and I saw an article on parenting, and it was interesting. The headline, of course, as they always do, grabbed my attention, and so I clicked on the link, and sure enough, I found myself reading something that I think a lot of us can align with. Is that we are raising a generation of children who are all about instant gratification, whether that be they want their snacks now, they want their electronic device now, and a lot of times we find ourselves giving in to them, not necessarily because of their needs, but also because of our needs. And so I was hoping we could talk about, from the parenting aspect, what are those motivations that we have and they have, and how they sometimes conflict with each other in that regard.
Yes, well, I will tell you from my experience that my wife often doesn't differentiate her work with respect to, that I'm just essentially one more child in the house that she has to parent. So I'm not sure that there's all that much difference between me and my children with respect to instant gratification, because I recognize that a lot of times I am interested, particularly after a long day at work or after some event, that I am looking to pacify myself.
Sure.
And I'm willing to steer away from goal-directed kind of behavior just to, I will admittedly watch an episode of Game of Thrones or do just about anything to avoid parenting, just because I'm up to my neck already at that point and I need some space. And I can't say that I always choose constructive or deliberate things to kind of.
Sure. I think all of us as parents at some point are guilty of this. Certainly I did yesterday. Like, I came home from work and I was tired, I was exhausted, my kid wanted attention. And right now my wife, who's a nurse, is working nights, or I should say the mid shift. So she's gone by the time I get home. It's me and the kiddo, and he's like, oh, daddy, wants attention. And I'm just like, kid, I'm exhausted. Like, you've had your social interaction for the day. Can we just sit and be calm for a second? Here's your electronic device, watch your videos, and daddy's just going to veg out for, an hour or how long. And so I think both of us needed that instant gratification, that moment. Now, I will say some redeeming portion of this. We did put down our electronic devices later. We went outside and we played at the park. We played with his blocks and his trains and things like that. So I was still connected with them. I was still engaged. But for at least that point in time, like, I didn't want to. And I feel like I have some guilt as a parent about that because I feel like maybe there's something I should be doing differently. Like I shouldn't just sit my kid down in front of a screen for any period of time. Like, that somehow makes me a bad parent. What do you guys think about that?
Well, there's a reason why you didn't detach from your kid for 3 or 4 hours, why you cut it off at 1. And I guess that's kind of, you said you were shooting on yourself to kind of get back into doing. I suspect you also wanted to connect with your son and do that stuff. But sometimes it is just, it's the guilt that brings us back. It's one of those moral emotions that brings us back to what we think is right, that puts us on a corrective path.
Yeah, I find it very difficult. There's several times where I'm single parenting it, spouse is deployed or, underwear or whatever, and you just get to this point where things need to get done, and they necessarily don't want to help you with that, right? I have a 4-year-old. I don't see him doing chores anytime soon,
Right.
He cleans his room, but that's about it. But, and so there's this moment where you're just like, you know what, like, here you go. Mm-hmm. Here's the device, sit on the couch for a few minutes.
Be calm, be quiet.
Exactly.
Right.
I try to, because there's a lot of parent shaming out there, like when you're in public and you see kids just on a lot of devices, it's quick to come to a judgment about that. And
Or you'll see parents who take this holier than thou attitude, like, well, we don't give our kids any screen time.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, I react with some, mixed feelings. But when I hear that, like when I hear people who've come up with really sophisticated and elaborate programs to minimize their kids' screen time, I'm like, dang,
that's incredible.
That's some great parenting. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like, I don't have the energy or emotional or mental wherewithal to sit down and hammer that out. But I'm always a little envious, But then I have to sit back and be like, well, what's the balance? Mm-hmm. What's the appropriate balance?
Yeah, I find that, my kids know that the work week is a mad dash to the weekend, right? And we have a very good routine that we follow. And sometimes there's little treats in there along the way, whether it's a piece of candy so my son will put his shoes on. There's a little bribery going on, right? Maybe a gummy snack to get in the car, But I think it helps to keep the routine going. But then they know come the weekend, then we usually do something that's more connected as a family. I mean, we intentionally make sure that we have meals together. We have breakfast together. We have dinner together. And so those are still happening. I ask them about their day. But as far as like when those areas are done, sometimes it's like, okay, ready, break. Everybody get their tasks done, get prepared for the next day, get your butts in bed, right? And then go to sleep to do it all over again.
I will just say, on the weekends, I will freely admit to, yes, it is a mad dash to the weekend, but sometimes those weekends do not look glorious. Sometimes those weekends look like lazing around, and that's okay. Sometimes that's needed, but sometimes, the objective might be to get dressed and get out of the house and do something, and we are just kind of sitting around. And I'm not super proud of that. I recognize that sometimes it's needed, but I'm worried, and I'm glad that we have a board-certified counseling psychologist here to talk us through this. But when is that too much, and when am I just becoming deconditioned, and when am I actually helping my kids to be deconditioned so that we actually have less ability to regulate our emotions and our tolerances, and how do we get back on track?
That is a great point. And I love that you brought up that question because it speaks to this concept of instant gratification. And we are in a culture where that is now the norm. We can access information anytime, anywhere. We can go to a number of different fast food chains and get food within 5 minutes a lot of times, for very little money. And so we become accustomed to getting what we want when we want it, almost right away. We even get, one day or same day shipping a lot of times for the things that we order online. And so it becomes this expectation. And I think somehow that's started to trickle down now to our kids because they see mommy and daddy are used to getting what they want when they want it. Now I should have that same expectation, and a lot of times we give in to that. Kids keep begging for a snack, and between meals, and we're like, fine, here, take your gummy bears and or whatever sugary snack, and just leave me alone. And they, instead of learning how to deal with being told no and how to self-regulate some of those emotions, they just get what they want. And so, if this goes on for too long, our kids can grow up feeling entitled, not knowing how to deal with boredom, and feeling like that they should just be entertained all the time, like they should just be having fun all the time. And if they're not having fun, then something's wrong. Or if they're bored, then somebody's got to do something differently to make them be having fun. And so that comes back on us as the parents, because now our kids don't know how to entertain themselves or to deal with these negative emotions, so they come to mom and dad. And now we're expected to hammer that out for them. And what do? We say, leave me alone, here's your screen.
Or we give them, good or bad attention. Maybe we give them the attention that they're craving, or maybe we, and I'll say I, have become so deconditioned as a parent that I'll just get animated and agitated when my kids are, after me, like, hey dad, let's go do this, or hey dad, let's go do that. I feel so shameful as I'm saying this. But if I get angry, agitated, or whatever, experience some kind of unpleasant emotion, they're still playing me like the video game, right? They're still getting the stimulation that they're looking for, whether or not I'm giving them the attention that they really want or that they think they want. They're still getting something from me, but I'm probably betraying my values and my goals and sort of my best aspirations for myself.
So the key here is to just be emotionally available to your kids. And I think a lot of us fall into the trap where once we get that kid calm and engaged in their screen time, we will do the same ourselves, whether we're on our phone or computer or watching TV, because that's our decompression time. And if we get too engaged in that, then we're no longer allowing ourselves to be emotionally available to our kids. And I feel guilty every now and then. I mean, this happens all the time when I'm sitting with my boy, we're both watching our respective screens, right? And all of a sudden he'll look up right next to each other, and we're cuddling up, and I feel like in some ways it's good quality time, but then I start to doubt that, because he'll turn his head up and look at me and go, Dada? And I'm like, hey, buddy. And then he'll point to the screen, and he'll be like, dog, cat, or something like that. And I realized I am not engaged at all. Right. He, and part of his mind, he feels like, I should be involved in this with him, but I'm totally not. And so I think that's where part of the guilt plays in. And so I think, there don't necessarily need to be hard and fast rules like, it's 1 hour screen time a day. I think we need to draw the line where we determine, is this activity taken away from our ability to emotionally engage with our kids and to teach them productive coping and social skills.
So can I ask a question? Because you can kind of look and see how a lot of this kind of plays out in the same way that we see other addictions playing out, right? Like, we become so poor at coping or dependent on some kind of outside substance or media to help us regulate our emotions. And usually, like just taking the example of alcohol, usually copious amounts of alcohol use or problematic alcohol use usually results in some kind of social or occupational dysfunction, right? That other people can see. But if other people are kind of doing the same thing too, it can kind of mask that. So I guess I'm kind of asking the crowd here, in your experience, what are those kind of what are the warning signs, or what are the red flags that, like, whoa, I should probably check myself here?
I think a good parallel to that is video game addiction.
Okay, yeah.
So because we're kind of talking about the same things. And if you think about the way that a lot of us are raising our kids, there is a potential for them to basically translate that screen time into different kinds of screen time when they're young adults. And I think at this more severe end of the spectrum, so we're not talking about everybody who enjoys video games, right? Sure. But the more severe end of the spectrum, you got people who begin to essentially self-isolate, and they no longer develop a lot of those more adaptive social skills that we would expect to see in normal society. Not that people are, have to be extroverted and outgoing and going to parties every weekend, but they lose the ability to hold conversations with other people and how to manage some of the more troublesome emotions like sadness and anxiety and anger. to where they feel like they can't navigate those social situations very well, and will just prefer to shun themselves from other folks. And I think that closes them off to a lot of what could be really positive reinforcement.
I know for me, one way that I gauge with the kids and their electronics is when I ask them to put it down. What is the behavior that then follows?
Yeah.
A lot of times, if my son gets crazy, even when I'm just like, hey, put the electronic device down, and like let's go do something together, or help me cook dinner or something. Depending on his behavior or my daughter's behavior, I can tell really quickly that like we either need to shut it down for a longer period of time, because sometimes full on tantrums.
Yeah.
They don't it's almost like this withdrawal. It's this insane process, and then you really ask yourself, was this worth the fight? Like, I chose to tell him to put this down, right? But in your head, you're like, I can't now reward him back with it, right?
Absolutely.
So you do get stuck in this conundrum.
I don't think it's you said withdrawal, and I think that's exactly what it is. I worked in an inpatient psychiatric, a substance abuse unit for many years, and a lot of the behaviors that you see there are really similar, frighteningly similar to what we see from our kids. If I turn the glass of introspection on myself, like, I'm sure that that's what happens to me as well. I just don't have other big people in my life pointing out, necessarily all of my flaws when you try to take away my electronic device. So kids are at a distinct disadvantage in that way, that they've got a bunch of adults who are analyzing their behavior, but like, how do we know for ourselves that when we have to put the cell phone away and have a dinner conversation, and we're less facile in that conversation because we're so unpracticed at it. Like, what are the red flags for us?
I think it comes down to the utility of that particular modicum. So, are we using this electronic device because we're bored? Or because we're feeling a certain way and we need a distraction, or are we doing it because we actually enjoy it? So, I would say I would rather my kid be addicted to going outside or to, playing with me, right? At his age, he's 2. I think that's appropriate. Maybe, not if he's 17. Yeah. But I'd rather him be, quote unquote, addicted to that versus to a screen. And I would hope that he comes to view this as divertment, as a source of entertainment and fun, but not necessarily something that he needs in order to self-regulate.
Right. So what you're advocating for is for a more mindful use of these kinds of electronics, like really examining what are our motivations, in the same way that we ask people who are maybe struggling with weight management to eat more mindfully, right? Like, can you talk to yourself right now about what your motivations are for putting that, high calorie, less than nutritive piece of food in your mouth? And if it's because you're bored or experiencing some kind of other emotion, and this is just the way that you've learned to regulate, well, then can you perhaps be more mindful about it in order to enable yourself to make a different set of decisions?
And so I have an interesting question then, because we're talking about helping them self-soothe and cope, right, and not maybe relying on that from your electronic device. But I know in my household, good behavior will be rewarded with an electronic device. And so, or like you get time. So is that, am I creating a situation where I'm encouraging the electronic device because that, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's
No, you're on the right track, absolutely. And this is actually very similar to people who were rewarded with food growing up. They can develop an unhealthy relationship with food and essentially experience some of these same type of addictive behaviors. And if you guys are getting turned off by the fact that we're using the terms addiction when it comes to screen time, I just want to emphasize that there's an area of our brain, we call it the reward pathway, but more specifically the ventral tegmental area, the VTA, that deals a lot with reward and reinforcement. And this same area is activated in all kinds of behavioral addictions, whether we're talking about substances or video games or any number of different things.
Gambling.
Yeah, exactly. There are things that we do that we enjoy, and they activate this reward pathway in our brain, and when that gets reinforced over and over again, and we find that it helps to override some of the negative emotions that we have, that's where addiction really starts to happen. So plausibly, you could become addicted to pretty much any set of behaviors if it activated this area.
And I think marketers and computer programmers and developers are, of course, savvy to this. And as I play video games today and to compare them to the video games that I played as a child, like, the amount of behavioral science that goes into video game development these days and the reinforcement patterns that they're building into these are crazy, and they're super potent, like a super potent kind of heroin. And I think when you look at like lab studies of rats, when they're essentially given the opportunity to either stimulate the pleasure sensors of their brain or have food or do any other kind of activity, they'll hit the button to stimulate that pleasure sensor of their brain to their detriment, essentially until they die, right? So they'll give themselves that dopamine hit over all other kind of behavior, even survival behaviors, to the point that they die. And then if that's too dramatic of an example for you, just maybe you can see sort of a scaled back version of that in your lives, that we're willing to forego a lot of things, including rewarding experiences with people that we love, that we cherish and share values and goals and dreams with, in a kind of automatic, unconscious way, just to kind of pacify ourselves and go through our day and just sort of have some level of ease and enjoyment.
Yeah, and it comes back to that need for reinforcement of that particular area in our brain. I mean, I can tell you many times where I have subverted Maslow's hierarchy of needs because there are other things I wanted to pursue. Like, in college, I would go out and stay up late, party and everything, when what I really needed and wanted was sleep at the time. But that social need was more important. And there are times now, as I've gotten older, where that's way less important. And maybe I'd just rather stay in and watch TV or play video games. So I think we need to, like you're saying, Dr. Reed, we need to be cognizant of our motivations for these things and the kind of functional role that they're playing, not just in our lives, but in our kids as well, especially as we're trying to train them in young adults to be able to handle some of these more complex issues themselves and make the right choices when it comes to taking care of their own social and emotional needs.
Yeah, and this is just another, again, a really good area to kind of just take a look at what your routine is, figure out if a change or maybe a modification is necessary, but if it's working and you guys are healthy and happy, then it's good.
Yeah, great discussion today, guys. I think we're advocating for a more mindful use of these kinds of media, or whatever the case may be. But great discussion, great insights. We want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening to the podcast, The Pillars, the podcast of the 363rd ISR Wing, and we'll catch you next time.
Later.